What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte. Today we are continuing to go over our playoff series, and this is the first video of 4 today, so stay tuned. Buckle up. If you didn't watch our videos from yesterday, we went over 4 of the 8 playoff series, and today we'll be following that up with 4 more as we get ready for round 1 of the 2025 Stanley Cup playoffs. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at this matchup in the Western Conference between the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues. I would be very concerned right now if I'm a Winnipeg Jets fan. And you might think to yourself, Kevin, why? The Winnipeg Jets finished with 55 wins this season, 114 points, leading the National Hockey League standings to a President's Trophy. And if you know anything about the NHL standings in that way over the last decade or two, usually teams that win the President's Trophy, there's the President's Trophy curse. And I believe truthfully that it is not a curse, but it's more so just the mentality going into the playoffs. This is a tough situation for the Winnipeg Jets that they find themselves in, playing a team like the St. Louis Blues, who for the last couple of years have been kind of in a retool, and maybe there was a thought if things really fell off this year, they would even fully rebuild this team. But all of a sudden, a couple of the younger players coming into the lineup, really developing and turning into legit NHL players here over the last 2-3 years, the St. Louis Blues kind of found their way in the playoffs by just kind of earning every single bit of it. You know, the way that this season started for the Blues, it looked like a disaster. We were talking about this team in December thinking things are going to change in St. Louis. Things do not look good for this team. And then just like that, St. Louis Blues find themselves probably the hottest team going into the playoffs in the entire National Hockey League. This is a team that has found ways to win despite themselves at points. And then they've added guys like Jimmy Snuggerud, who got his first NHL goal the other night. Things continue to be on the up for the Blues going into the postseason. So where does that leave the Winnipeg Jets? Because like I said, we just talked about a team that, their goals for this season, third best in the National Hockey League. Their goals against, best in the National Hockey League, giving up only 185 goals 185 goals this season. That's the least in the league. They won the William M. Jennings Trophy between the two goaltenders there in Winnipeg, which is really nice. Obviously, more on the back of Connor Hellebuyck, but still, this is a team that has found ways to win. And Eric Comrie, yeah, I got to throw that out there, right? The most games played this season for any goaltender, 63 games for Connor Hellebuyck. So nothing really surprising, but that is a factor here. Also considering he had 47 wins this season, a really solid season for him. He had a .925 save percentage, a 2.00 goals against average, exactly 2 goals against per game this season. That's the best goals against average in the National Hockey League. So again, you're seeing a lot of stats here with a hot goaltender that can prove to be a problem for teams come playoff time. Eric Comrie also has pretty good numbers, though. He only played in 20 games this season. He did put up a .914 save percentage, though, and a 2.39 goals against average. That's a very serviceable backup. That's a very good backup. And they were able to get good goaltending this year. Now, a lot of that is, we kind of forget about how solid the defense is for the Winnipeg Jets. They have a very good defense. They have for a very long time now. And the only real injuries here, which are a little bit concerning, you have Rasmus Kupari, who's been out since March. Gabe Vilardi, he's been out since March with an upper body injury. Kupari, it was a concussion. And then Nikolai Ehlers, who most recently had an injury on April 13th, a foot injury. He's listed as week to week, but going into the postseason, is this a little bit more of a chess match? And then all of a sudden, game 1, magically, Nikolai Ehlers is ready to go. I don't really know the whole story here, but again, just keep that in mind going into this series. Losing Nikolai Ehlers, if he's out for any part of this series, that's a big loss for the Jets. Now, looking at the top point producers for the Jets here, no real surprise here. Kyle Connor with 97 points this season, just quietly chugging away at basically a 100-point season. No big deal. Mark Scheifele, another solid season for him, 87 points this year. And then Nikolai Ehlers, basically a point per game. He only has 63 points this season. He only played in 69 games, though. He did not play a full season. Another really solid season from Josh Morrissey, Gabe Vilardi, Cole Perfetti, each putting up 50, 61-point seasons, respectively. That's a really solid season for those guys. So a lot of the players on the Jets, kind of the quiet soldiers there in Winnipeg, just getting things done quietly. And I think that's the best thing for them. The only thing that's really hurting them at this point is they do have that President's Trophy in their lap going into the 2025 playoffs. And it's one of those things, it's kind of like the hot potato. Nobody wants the President's Trophy, but you kind of get it given to you sometimes. That's kind of what happened here for the Jets. And I think if you want to be optimistic for the Jets, if you're telling yourself what is different about this team than the teams we've seen before, well, obviously what's different, they won the President's Trophy. They've never won the President's Trophy in franchise history. That is different than some of the Jets teams we've seen in the past. So if you want to look at it in a positive way, there is that. Also, Connor Hellebuyck is in the prime of his career. This reminds me a lot of the 2019, 2020, 2021 Montreal Canadiens, where Carey Price was at the peak of his game and carried the Montreal Canadiens to that Stanley Cup final run. I could see something like that here for the Winnipeg Jets with Hellebuyck. Like, Hellebuyck could be just unbeatable in the playoffs. And that's going to be a really important thing. But the problem is, over the last few seasons, Hellebuyck has struggled in the postseason. Even looking back to last year, really the last 2 years, Hellebuyck's had great numbers during the regular season, and he kind of falls off in the playoffs. So how is that going to transfer to 2025? And that's why I think just this is a different group. There was a lot of things over the last couple years, locker room issues, coaching issues with this team, and if they really were able to pull the root of the issue out, this team should find a way to win this series. Meanwhile, for the St. Louis Blues, because we really haven't talked about the Blues much here so far, we need to take a look at the Blues because they really turned things on very much to start 2025. This is the type of thing where we look back and it reminds us very much of that run they went on and they won the Stanley Cup back in, what was that, I cannot believe that was 2017, 2019? Because I know Washington won in 18. It was either 17 or 19. The St. Louis Blues won the Stanley Cup. Had a terrible start to the season, and then just the stock rose on that team. They ended up winning the Stanley Cup. So a lot of comparisons to this team in that regard. You have some really good players that have been out injured and out for a long time. Torrey Krug, Dylan Holloway. Krug has been out since September. He's on LTIR. We don't expect to see him for the postseason. Dylan Holloway, lower body injury. He's considered week to week. That was back 2 weeks ago, or the other day. Considered week to week still. So we're going to see what happens with Holloway. And then Robert Thomas, he did not return to the game Tuesday against Utah. So I don't know if that's more precautionary, but that's a pretty big loss if Robert Thomas isn't in the lineup. The St. Louis Blues, one of their weaknesses is their penalty kill. It's pretty below average. It's in the bottom 20 of the National Hockey League. That's not great against a Winnipeg Jets team that, when you have guys like a healthy Ehlers, if he's in the lineup, but even not, you have guys like Perfetti, Velarde, going down the list, Scheifele, Connor. Those guys can score goals. So you got to make sure you keep the puck out of the net. Really, ideally for the Blues, just stay out of the penalty box. I know it's easier said than done. That's going to be a pivotal part of this series. That could really change the tide in a game and in a series. If the Jets are getting a bunch of power plays, it's probably going to be a good thing for the Jets. Robert Thomas leads this team in points, 81 points on the year for Robert Thomas. Jordan Kyrou right there with 70 points, leading the way for goals with 36. Really solid season and campaign for Kyrou. This is a team that really has had a lot of things happening, right? There was debate about whether they would trade their captain, Braden Shen, at the trade deadline. They opted to keep him. We're seeing that kind of pay dividends at this point. The goaltending has really found a way to just hold in there. Joel Hofer and Jordan Binnington, their numbers are not the best. It's definitely not favorable for them. And again, that's where when we're talking about, out-dueling another goaltender, it's going to be tough. Binnington versus Hellebuyck, that's definitely going to be in favor of Hellebuyck. In terms of who I think is going to win this series, this is a really tough one to predict because the easy answer is, well, the team that won the President's Trophy has the hot goaltender. It should obviously be the Winnipeg Jets. But then you remember that it's the Stanley Cup playoffs, and literally anything can happen. And this is one of those series where Winnipeg is probably thinking, I wish we were able to pick our opponent, because this is probably the last opponent that the Winnipeg Jets would have picked. The team that just squeaked into the playoffs, took game 82 to make it, and the fact that they've been playing playoff hockey for the past month now. They have been playing playoff hockey, trying to stave off elimination for a month now. They've been in do or die mode. They're in that mode. They're going to just continue that momentum right into the playoffs. The Jets, we're a little banged up. Let's sit out a guy. We're taking a little break here, this and that. That could be a disaster. And I kind of talked about this in the Eastern Conference with Toronto and Ottawa. Like, if Ottawa could jump on the Leafs early in the series, that could pose a pretty big problem for the Leafs and kind of create that buzz around, like, uh-oh, here we go again in Toronto, and that noise gets to the players. You kind of wonder if that could happen with Winnipeg here. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to go with the fun pick because that's what we do here at Goal Line Hockey. We're going to go with the off-the-board pick. If there is one series that I'm pretty confident that kind of the I guess the team without home ice advantage, the underdog, I guess you could say, in this series would be St. Louis. I'm going to go with the Blues winning this series in 7 games. They're going to win in the whiteout up in Winnipeg. This is a tough series to predict because I think it depends on what version of Connor Hellebuyck we see. If it's Connor Hellebuyck taking the show over, he gets 2 shutouts in this series, the Jets are going to win this series. If it comes down to, power plays and things like that, again, also in favor of the Jets. If the Blues are able to just continue the momentum that they've carried throughout the season, right into the postseason, like no big deal, whether it has Stanley Cup playoffs written on the ice or not, doesn't really matter. That's going to be a benefit for the Blues. But there's a lot of guys on the Blues that, again, this is a team that's more of a team environment. And not to say the Jets aren't like that. I just think I trust more of the younger depth and even the rookies that have come in for the Blues. There's a certain energy around St. Louis right now. It's very toxic and not in a bad way. I mean, it's like it's very much something that is going to help this team going into the postseason, and they could pose to be a pretty big threat. And once I talk about my final bracket for the 2025 playoffs, I think people are going to be surprised where I end up having the Blues, because this could be that similar run to what we saw not that long ago from the St. Louis Blues. So that's going to do it for today's video. Let me know what you guys think down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time.